Okay guys, end of the month, I've got to go down and pay some bills, and I thought I might do a video on the pretentious foreigners here in Japan. But first I'd like to shout out to Randy from Texas for your support on Buy Me a Coffee. You're an absolute legend. So when you live here, you'll come across a lot of pretentious foreigners, and they tend to be older, 50 or more, and they take a lot of pride in being here for a long time, and they spout a lot of nonsense, and they usually come from upper middle class families, and they talk a lot about the culture here. And they tend to be house crazy people. These people who buy these really old Japanese houses, and they're sort of self-professionals, self-taught professionals, so to speak, on the whole matter, and most of the time they're just living in a total alternate reality. So they like to talk about the old things in Japan and the way things were done and the way houses were built, and all their conclusions, when I say all, 99% of their conclusions are just not true at all. They like to talk about the old carpentry skills and the way things used to be done back in the day, and they sort of relent on how things are being done now, and basically the world is going down because they're not doing what they did 150 years ago, and all this sort of nonsense. So as an example, pretty much all the houses were built without nails before 1800s and back, and this was because people didn't want to get on their horse and cart and go up the mountains with a shovel and a pickaxe and go and get the ore, bring it all back down, cut trees, make charcoal, and then forge their own nails. So you can imagine just the amount of work that would take, cutting down trees, making charcoal, then going back up the mountain, digging your own iron ore, and then bringing it back down and smelting it. So the Japanese, being Japanese, of course they do everything practically, and these sort of methods were done as time savers, but they like to point out that they took extra time to do, and they had extra care and all this sort of stuff. It's just the opposite is actually true. To do it the other way was either out of their reach as far as cost to buy these things, or just the amount of time to do it with nails and things like this, just totally impractical. But they like to sell the theory that they were actually more traditional and all this sort of thing. It's just totally untrue. And they frame a lot of this in context of sustainability and all this sort of nonsense, and that they had this in mind. No, they didn't. They had their own time in mind. They had to build their houses as cheap as possible and take as little time as possible, and that's what everybody did because it was practical. It wasn't because of any other reason, but they like to sort of take today's situation and today's philosophy and apply it to a bygone era, and it's just absolute nonsense. The same for the arts and crafts. Back in the time, there was a market for handmade goods, pottery, ceramics, all this sort of stuff, big markets. Because in the 1800s, people with excess money, they couldn't jump on a jet airplane and go to Miami on the beach, could they? So people with extra money, they have to spend it somehow. So you would spend it on luxury items, handmade items, things like this. It wasn't because they had a different spirituality about them or anything like this. It's just a matter of practicalities. You look at today's people now, people who are super rich, they have too much money to spend, it's burning a hole in their pocket. They go out and buy a painting. And you get a lot of this sort of mentality, and it's just annoying. And they like to sort of put other people down, that if other people buy an old house and they're not keeping to the so-called tradition, that they're somehow doing a disservice to Japanese culture or to Japan, and it's just totally insulting, and it's all based on their lack of understanding of actually what the situation was at the time, and they're putting a whole different reality on a situation that didn't exist. I've seen on the internet of people buying an old house, and they have a limited budget, and they're renovating it to their budget, and people in the comments coming up with nasty sort of commentary like, you don't deserve to have that house because you don't respect Japanese culture. So Japanese culture was being convenient at the time the house was built, and it was built to what the people could afford at the time, and what was logical, what took them the least amount of time and expense. And they've been sort of brainwashed into thinking that this is culture. No, it's not. It's how things were done for a reason. So heading back, I've got a close friend, and we talk about these people from time to time and have a bit of a laugh, and we sometimes have a bit of a joke of what these type of people will be saying in 200 years from now, if we ever get flying cars. So I suspect these type of people will be saying just how respectful our generation is to nature, because we drive around in cars with rubber tires, because rubber is a natural material, and not even thinking about the fact that rubber tires are the most comfortable to drive around on, because it takes all the vibration out of the road. But I'm sure these type of people will come up with some sort of philosophy of why we drive around on rubber tires, and why we are spiritually better than the generations that will come. So I sort of grew up in the time of when everybody was saying that I'll be driving a horse at the moment, we're going to run out of oil, and yada yada yada, and these people were saying, we're going to run out of oil and we're going to go back to the horse, and all this sort of stuff, and it's just not based on reality at all. Technology increases, people do what's practical. When gasoline becomes no longer practical, it'll move on to something else, and that's the way everything is in every culture. People have a limited amount of time, they have a limited amount of money, and that's why they do things 99.99% of the time. But this sort of thinking never gets into their conversations. It's easy to romanticize the past, and people talk about the good old days, and I'm fortunate enough that I got to speak to my great-great-grandmother, who lived almost to 100, and she was a very down-to-earth woman, and I asked her a couple of questions about the good old days, and she had one word to say. She said it stank, because everyone was around on their horses, and there was poo everywhere. So that's the good old days. So my great-great-grandmother, they used to have the outhouse, and it was a good 20 metres away from the house, and that's where people used to do their thing, because it stank. And then technology came along, indoor plumbing, and they moved the toilets inside. But these people want to reinvent the wheel and distort things, that having a compost toilet inside your house is a good idea. I don't know how they can come to that conclusion unless they've got problems with the way they smell, because compost toilets stink. And it's based on the premise that it's more environmentally friendly. That just got through. More environmentally friendly to compost your sewage inside a hole in the ground in your own house. Well, I don't know about that, but that's pretty hilarious. So taking the sewage away to be treated, and potentially be reused as irrigation and things like this. That makes sense, and that's why people do it. And it makes sense not to have a compost toilet inside a $300,000 house, because that's just insane, isn't it? So this is more true of the older people that have been in Japan for a long time, and they have a very distorted view on history, because none of them have studied history or pretty much anything practical, and they come to conclusions because somebody told them that told somebody else that told somebody else, and it must be true. And people don't actually get to the heart of the matter, and the heart of the matter is always economics, and people are going to do what they can afford and what's the most practical, and it doesn't matter what time in history it is. It'll be the same now as it was before. It'll be the same into the future. If you don't have the means, it just doesn't happen. This is just logic, but so many people don't want to apply this. The houses that are still standing now, I did a video on this, are the ones built by people who had more money at the time, who had more resources, so their houses stand the test of time. So if you look at all through history, the only buildings that are remaining from the Roman period were built by the government, because they had the most resources. And it's not because the Romans were good builders. That's also not true. Only the buildings that are standing now leaves a bias in people's minds that they were good builders. Most of the buildings in Rome didn't survive. So you can take these survivor biases and apply whatever thought you want on them, but the reality will always be the same. No matter what sort of spin you want to put on it. And you hear a lot of this here, and if you want to go and buy an old house and you want to go and put hundreds of thousands of dollars in it, you're just going to be viewed as a normal sort of little bit eccentric foreigner, and most Japanese don't buy these houses and renovate them. That's why there's 8 million of them on the market, because they're not wanted. I've done a whole IKEA series on this on my Patreon. If anyone wants more in-depth about IKEAs, go over to Patreon. But you go and put all your money into these places and sort of drink the Kool-Aid on all this sort of stuff, do all your money, and you're going to find out that the girl you meet doesn't even want to live in the place that you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars renovating, because people don't like them. And it's not because they don't like their culture, because it's got nothing to do with their culture. But a lot of these people will still spin these yarns because it makes them look educated, and they're far from it. So anyway, guys, as always, hope you liked the video.
Let's go back home.